This content was created purely for entertainment and informational purposes. The creators of this vlog do not endorse drinking and driving, debauchery, underage drinking, public intoxication, speeding, street racing or any other form of delinquency. I'm just a guy, with a drink, talking about cars. Please don't take this too seriously.
Welcome back to Cocktails and Crankshafts. It's your boy, the Killer Bee, the Fat Man, Africanized Honeybee, the Car Guy Blog 05 at gmail.com, Guy at 05car on Twitter, at 05car on Instagram, at 05car on Facebook. With me, as always, is my fabulous co-host, May Flowers. What up, May?
What up?
And today we're doing something different. So she's going to be the play-by-play, and I'm going to be the color commentary. We're going to try that out.
Boom. So
it's all yours.
I get to be Hall and you are Oates this week.
Sure, that. But Oates could drive a race car. I don't think Daryl could.
Probably not. Probably not. You know, we all have our strengths.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So this week we're going to be talking about women in motorsports, specifically Michele Mouton. I think that's how you say that. That's my best attempt at a French accent, and I'm going to not do that anymore. Despite all of my years of language, I'm probably going to butcher some of these things, but you know. So Michele Mouton is a former French rally driver, and actually her birthday was just last week, so happy birthday, Michele. So she competed in the World Rally Championship for the Audi team. She took home several victories and finished runner-up in the Drivers' World Championship in 1982. She started rallying as a co-driver, but then eventually took on to be a lead driver in her own races. So in the 1982 World Rally season, she finished a close second. And this is after she had wins in Portugal, Brazil, and Greece. She helped Audi get their first manufacturer's title.
Here's the interesting thing about that. The reason why, and it's easy to look back on the past and have feelings about it, but Audi's goal, Volkswagen Group's goal, was to win the manufacturer's title. And therefore, they did not pay a lot of attention. They had an all-star driver lineup, and they had a heavy driver lineup. I mean, they had like 3-4 cars in every rally, which all the big manufacturers had at least 2 and sometimes 3. But the problem was when Michele was leading the points for the drivers' championship, they didn't shift their strategy to protect her. And consequently, because their goal was to win the manufacturers' championship, they kind of let that slip through their fingers when it would have been a momentous occasion, because she would have been the first woman to ever win a major international motorsports championship. And they let it slip away. And really, she crashed out of the last race of the season. But there were points earlier in the year where she could have consolidated and built upon her advantage to where that last race wouldn't have mattered so much. But, you know, that's looking back on it 40 years hence.
Right. Well, and it sounds like she did a couple of really big things and then kind of faded away. So in 1985, she won the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb in the U.S. and set a record time in that race. And then in 1986, she went to and won the German Rally Championship. And this was the first female driver to do that. Which, again, these are like pretty phenomenal things happening in rally driving. And again, just there's this, when you look for her in information, these are the things are mentioned, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of talk about how monumentous this was. But after she secured that title, she retired from rallying because there was a ban of Group B supercars.
So the Group B cars was the category she drove. The Audis were the Group B cars. The best way to say it is, imagine a car with 500 horsepower, all-wheel drive on a narrow, twisting dirt road or gravel road or snow-covered road or ice-covered road, lined with human beings, no fences, no barricades of any kind, and the cars were literally. One of the first videos I saw where I saw Michelle drive was a VHS tape called "Too Fast to Drive." It was all about the Group B era. Group B was just a category, a racing category. You had Group A, Group B, Group C, and I think later they added Group N. The Group B cars had very little restrictions on them. They had to vaguely resemble production street cars, sort of. And you had to build like 50 or 100 street versions of a particular car before you could race it. But, you know, the original Audi was a long road car based coupe. The Group B Audi, well, the original Group B Audi was the long wheelbase, the standard wheelbase as the street Quattro. The Audi Sport, the short wheelbase version, they chopped the car and shortened it. And then they did things like they moved the radiator to the back, and they added wings, and they added flares, and they added spoilers and more turbo boost. And these cars were insanely fast to be driving in on the roads that they were driving on. You know, there was a crash. I think it was a Ford RS200, left the road and plowed into the crowd and killed 3 people and injured like 30 something. And they were really lucky they only killed 3 people, honestly.
Oh my gosh.
But the final straw that broke the camel's back was Portugal or Corsica, I forget which. Henry Toivonen and Sergio Cresto, his co-driver, were driving in a Lancia Delta S4, and they lost it. And nobody knows, because by the time anyone got there, there was nothing left but a burned out hulk of the tube frame. Everything else had been consumed in the fire. Nobody really knows exactly why they left the road or how. Toivonen was a good driver, but was a little reckless isn't the right word. He was young and enthusiastic, I guess you could say. But there's some people said he had the flu and he wasn't feeling well or whatever. But in any case, they left the road over a cliff into the trees, and there was nothing left but, you know, the roll cage.
Ooh.
And after that, the organizers, I think they canceled that race, and then they immediately banned Group B for the following year. So I think that was 1986. They banned Group B for 87. And the World Rally Championship was then contested with Group A cars, I think, which are lightly modified. They're about 300 horsepower, I guess. So anyway, they canceled Group B for safety reasons. Between the wreck where they injured the spectators and then the driver and the co-driver dying, and I don't think Toivonen and Cresto were the only ones to die, but that was the last straw, and they canceled the category. I think they got the race out the 86 season, but they said no more Group B for 87. And that was that. And the cars were literally too fast to race. I mean, you know, modern cars might be quicker over a given stage,
Right.
but they have far less horsepower. They have a lot more technology than those Group B cars had, and they're certainly a lot sturdier and safer to drive.
Yeah, that's a mess.
Yeah.
I could see why that was eliminated, because we can't have people going over cliffs and dying. That's not the move.
I mean, you know, motorsports, people die at car racing, much
True.
less so today than back then, but still it happened. Now, there's a couple of little interesting tidbits about Madame Mouton. Let's see. She's a knight in the French Legion of Honor. The proper title is Chevalier, I guess, which
Fancy.
is like the lowest. It's like being a member of the Order of the British Empire. It's like the entry level knighthood for French people.
Okay.
That was 2011 by President Nicolas Sarkozy. She had a variety of nicknames. You're gonna love these: the Devil with the Face of an Angel, the Gentle Savage, the Black Tigress, the French Volcano, and the Black Volcano. And some of that may be
Why
due.
the Black Volcano or the French
So
Volcano?
she had that jet black hair. She's from the south of France, And she had that sort of that Mediterranean kind of look. She had the jet black hair and apparently a very fiery temper. So
What else?
somebody say she was, she would almost look more Greek or Italian than French,
Then
but
French.
apparently she had a temper, or could be that she was a woman and she showed some emotion. So then they said, "Oh, she's so temperamental." But
She's so emotional.
no, I got a quote. You're gonna love this quote. I would hate it when the journalist would come to me at the end of a rally and say, "Can you smile?" I would say, "Okay, you go find Bloomquist or Mikola and ask them to smile, and then come back to me."
Oh my
Um,
gosh, that's so true. That's
yeah,
the
because
worst.
Stig Blomquist and Hanu Mikola were not happy go lucky kind of people. Certainly
Right, well,
not at the
right.
end of a grueling race when they've been eating dirt and rocks, and you saw how bumpy that was, and that was just a little Porsche on some sand. Let me show you a clip
Right. That video was
of
crazy. That made me hurt watching it.
now. You've been wrangling a 500 horsepower beast all day,
Yeah, and
and
the last thing you want to
motherfuckers
be
coming
told,
at you talking about smile.
can you smile? Can you smile? How about that?
Motherfucker, please. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Smile these
So,
nuts.
but you saw her coworker, her co-driver for Fabrizia. I think that's her name, Fabrizia Pons, I believe her name was,
Hmm.
um, or is. I think she's still alive. Um, you saw at one point the car was heavily damaged and they were still driving it because they wrecked. They had a real bad wreck one time where Fabrizia had a concussion and had to leave on the helicopter, I think, and they that was hard enough that race ended for them. But yeah, it's some literal life or death shit, and people talking about
Yeah.
smile. But they were a gimmick, even though she was a legit driver. They were a gimmick because they were an all girl team, and you hadn't seen that for many years. So her and Pat Moss never competed against one another, but they did. I think they attended the same race once in 1973 in Monte Carlo. So that would have been very late or at the end of Pat's career, but very early in Michele's career. So her first legit world championship rally was 2 months after I was born.
Oh, snap.
So that was the Tour de Course in 1974. That was her first World Rally Championship event, which was that also the very first ever World Rally Championship event? Because there didn't used to be the WRC as we know it today is a relatively modern invention, even though the sport of rally goes back to the turn of the 20th century, actually. So they had different names for it. It was the European Rally Championship or the Championship of Makes for Rally or some other nonsense. But the title World Rally Championship is relatively modern, has only come along since the 70s.
So once she retired from rallying because the Group B cars were discontinued, she continued to do some racing here and there. In 1988 and 1989, she participated in the rally raids as a part of. She took a role in the Dakar Rally as a press driver in 2004 and 2009. Um, in 2000, she finished second place in the London Sydney Marathon, and at this point, she was driving a Porsche 911. And then in 2010, she competed with a Porsche 911 in the Rallye du Maroc,
Yes,
Maroc,
that's
probably
the
Maroc.
video. That was the video we just watched. The first video.
The first video,
Yeah, that was her
um,
practicing for the Rally de Maroc.
and came in second. So yay. Also in 2010, she became the first president of the FIA's Women in Motorsport Commission. Um, and this is sort of where her legacy continues today, doing promotion and um, inclusion and trying to build the base to get more women into motorsports. So she's transitioned into um, an advocate, so to speak, to get women in the sport. And she is on the nomination committee for the Rally Hall of Fame. Yay. Where she was inducted. So congrats to her. And if you do a general lookup of just women in motorsports, like we've talked about before, there's bits and pieces of history that are starting to trickle out and get more traction as people start thinking about what's happening. Um, as most recent as this 2021 um, Indy 500, there was an all women's team, the Peretta Auto Sports, considered to be an historic appearance, with Simona Di Silvestro being their driver. So they did earn a spot into the race. They did not do as well as anticipated or as they would like, but it's still historic to see a woman-owned team, a woman driver, a female-led pit crew um, out there trying to make their mark.
Absolutely. So another little interesting career tidbit for Michelle was that in 1975, she and Marianne Hopfner, oh, I butchered that, and Christine Dacremont won the 2-liter prototype class at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So
Ooh.
she did do a little bit of road racing, just a little bit. She was primarily a rally driver, but she did a little bit of road racing. She also founded the Race of Champions, which is not to be confused with the International Race of Champions, which is basically just a glorified NASCAR spec series, or used to be. The Race of Champions was a little more broad reaching in the types of drivers that they would invite to participate. And it was sort of a made for TV kind of deal where you would drive. I had a videotape of it once. Again, videotape. Tells you how long ago it was. Jeff Gordon had entered, and he did quite well, actually, because they were driving. They had to drive like a Porsche, and then like a rally car and a dune buggy. But it was these identical courses where you had jumps and bumps and your time. It was really neat, and they invited a wide variety of different types of drivers from different racing series around the globe. A true international race champions, not like IROC where they put them all in spec Camaros and have them drive around Charlotte and Martinsville and whatever. I used to hate the IROC series so much. I'm getting off topic. I'm going to talk about a couple things real quick.
I mean, that car does look fun to drive.
Oh yeah, I'd drive one in Gran Turismo sometimes. It's a hoot. But I don't have an experience rally driving or soft surface driving at all. So I need to learn how to do that. But so what I'll say, because I was not introduced to Michelle until I was out of college. So I was well into my 20s, almost 30, actually. Things that I would note, and I'll be careful here. She was not an unattractive woman. She wasn't anybody's fashion model, but she was fundamentally attractive. She got a lot of attention. Her and Fabrizia got a lot of attention for their gender. And also they were attractive women. And she tells a story about, and I don't know the context because it's just a clip, but she talks about a guy opening the door of the car and reaching in to touch her.
Oh.
As they were getting their countdown to launch. The steward was, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And she said some dude opened the door and touched her. And
no, sir.
I never really got the context whether that was a sexual touching or just, fans, because rally fans would do. I mean, they would try to touch the cars as the cars came by. There are stories, and they're kind of urban legends, but there are urban myths of the mechanics finding bits of people's fingers inside the vents and grills on the cars where people would reach out and touch the cars that was coming by.
To touch them, yeah.
Ridiculous,
crazy fan stuff.
Yes, crazy fan stuff. And so I don't know the full context of that, but it's funny to hear her recount that story. And it's like, what the and you're like, well, wouldn't the stewards do a better job than that? But no, that security wasn't really their function. And she even said it in that same quote, it's like, really, in rallying, the people are part of the course, which is a terrifying thing to think about when you're driving a 500 horsepower car on dirt and gravel and mud and snow and ice. But
exactly.
Again, that's why they had some of the fatalities and injuries that they had, and that's why part of the reason why Group B was ended when it was. And they do better job on crowd control now, but still, yeah. But I say that, and it's hypocritical of me because I was at Pikes Peak in 2013, and it's all paved now, so the flavor of the race is very different. The speeds are much higher, but the other thing is there's still no guardrails or barriers, and the places where you are allowed to stand as a spectator, I mean, they have yellow tape in places where you can't stand, right?
Right.
So me and a bunch of other dudes were standing right next to where the yellow tape ended. And we joked at one point, it's like, if somebody comes over here, we're all gonna die. They're like,
Right.
oh no, man, I'm jumping in that ditch. So it's like, yeah, okay, jumping in that ditch. You think you can get down there fast enough? If a
Right.
car loses it here, we're all going to get wiped out, period.
Because the car is not going to recognize, oh, there's tape. Oh, there's not tape.
Right.
That's not how that works.
Now, the reality is they lay those areas out in such a way to where they know cars are more apt to lose it.
Right.
Certain areas of the apex of the turn and the outside edge of the turns, they'll say, okay, well, if a car, they would go off here. But these things are not always predictable because cars don't always go off in a predictable way. Sometimes it's due to a component failure or whatever, and that changes the equation. But when we talk about women in motorsports and the sexism inherent in motorsports, it's like it's still pervasive. And I'll say this: I am not a Danica Patrick fan, but I understood the Danica Patrick scenario. What I didn't like about Danica was her attitude. Put it mildly, she was an asshole, an entitled asshole, which was funny to me because she wasn't that good of a driver. What is an IndyCar driver? She won exactly one race, but she wanted to pick a fight with Milka Dunno, and Milka Dunno was slow. Okay, we get it, but Milka Dunno had what a lot of people have: money. You can buy your way into a ride. Slow people have been buying their way into race cars for decades, forever, since the beginning
especially
of
in a sport that's so dependent on having money for equipment and things.
As
money will get you a long way.
Race cars run on money. Race teams run on money, and I always thought it was interesting. And then her finger pointing and chest jabbing with dudes much larger than her, because Danica Patrick was quite petite. That sort of feeling like, well, I'm going to do this because there's TV cameras and I can get away with this. And this dude's not going to knock my head off. There should be more women in motorsports, but there should be more women in the boardroom, in the legislatures, in the C-suite, so
it's not a pipeline problem. It's once you're in the pipe.
No, it's definitely a pipeline problem.
Push you out.
With motorsports, it's definitely a pipeline problem.
You think?
But yes, in this country at least. But part of that is traditional gender roles, and there's a lot of women in this country that think they're not supposed to like cars because that's a guy thing, and it has always been presented as a guy thing. And well, it's like black folks. It's the same problem with black folks. Yes, there's a money issue, but I know black people that have money that like cars but still won't race a car because it's perceived as something other people do.
Right, because once you get in those spaces and you can blatantly feel the hostility and they're not welcoming, and sometimes it's not even not welcoming because anybody in particular is aggressive or mean or says anything to you, just the mere fact that when you go somewhere, it's just you, or maybe you and 2 or 3 other people.
It is hard being lonely. That is a form of inherent hostility that is not overt or caused by other. And I've even had the other thing where people will come up and try to purposefully talk to me and make me feel welcome and at home. And honestly, sometimes that just makes it worse.
Exactly.
Because it reminds you of the fact that there's nobody there like you.
Right. Yeah, I think that's even worse sometimes because it is rough.
And there's a debate, and we don't want to make this into a gender study thing, of course, but there's a debate about whether women should be competing against men in motorsports or whether they should have sort of their own dedicated feeder series. and I think there's probably arguments on both sides. It's like single gender education. There's arguments on both sides.
Right.
And there are
Because
people
I'm
on
not
both sides of
sure.
the fence that would say yes and say no. So
Yeah, because I think when driving a car, I don't think we're necessarily talking about like muscle advantage or strength advantage. I mean, I'm
not
sure there's. I mean, I'm sure there's always some
not in the modern cars,
in
not
the
so much.
right.
It depends on the type of car and the type of racing, but Cheryl was petite and Cheryl could drive a sprint car.
Right.
Danica was petite and Danica could drive an Indy car and NASCAR, because I think even NASCARs have power steering now. Now the flip side is, because somebody complained, I think when Danica first got into Indy cars, there was complaint about her weight.
Because she was lightweight,
Yes, because
and that being seen as an advantage.
some racing series, the car is the minimum weight is with the driver in it. And in other series, the minimum weight is just the car. So there can be an advantage there if she weighs 60, 70, 80, 100 pounds less than other. But
Yeah, the average dude.
there are no large Formula car drivers. Let's just be real about that. That's not a
Yeah.
place where big people go. The days of large frame IndyCar and Formula One and Formula car, open wheel car drivers is pretty much past these days.
Right.
They're all little people. Alain Prost was a little bitty guy. Schumacher was not terribly large himself. So the size strength thing isn't an issue, but it's like when you do girls STEM. One of the things I noticed, and I tried when I was doing these kinds of things, I talked to some ladies I know, and I tried to get them to sponsor an all girls team. And I think maybe the message was delivered wrong because it was coming from me.
Maybe.
And one of the ladies I tried to get involved, I knew her feelings about that kind of thing. But what I told her is, like, it's not for you, it's for them, because there are times when if you have a mixed gender group, and I saw it with the kids that I worked with, the boys would start to dominate and talk over the girls if somebody didn't say, hey, shut up, let's hear what she has to say.
Right.
Just because that's the social norm. And so when you have all girls on a team, you eliminate that piece of it. So if you had a situation where you had a race team that was all women, or a racing series that was all women, it eliminates a certain social dynamic. Recall me talking about how Cheryl had some issues with, she married one or two of her crew chiefs, but in particular, she was driving at an event and the crew really didn't want anything to do with her. And we weren't sure if that was a gender thing or a race thing, but it almost doesn't matter.
Right.
If the people who are there to support you, I mean, Willie T talked about this. If the people who are there to support you in keeping the car in the best condition it can be don't want to see you succeed or aren't interested in working with you, that's a difficult dynamic to overcome as a driver.
Absolutely.
So, and I know there was at least one incident with Michelle where that may have been an issue, where apparently they put the wrong tires on her car on purpose, or the tires went to somebody else on the team because they thought his chances of winning were better. And I don't know the whole story because I didn't have a chance to read all the details on that. But certainly she experienced some sexism, some blatant sexism in her career, because she was driving in the 70s and 80s.
Absolutely.
That was almost the wild, wild west back then. There's some
Sure
of the men in the series were said, there's no way I'm losing to a woman. I won't let her beat me. She'll never beat me. I'll never lose to her. And that's stuff they said in the press. So
I say, right, that's the stuff people say. That was the quiet part out loud back then. Now it'll just be the quiet part. But
yeah, I mean, and
there.
I can even think back in younger days when I said some things that were, I won't say problematic, I'll say ugly. They were just plain ugly.
And I mean, all our faves are problematic at this point.
I know, but I know where some of that came from. There was some, but anyway, so Michelle is definitely a pioneer and some people call her still to this day call her the fastest woman in the world.
Yeah.
Danica Patrick or Lynn St. James or Shirley Muldowney might argue with that, but
Right. Well, I mean,
certainly
she's still the only woman to have won a world championship rally.
no.
So
Oh well, yeah. And certainly, well, she was the first to win the German national title, right?
yeah.
I don't know if she's the only one to ever win a national title, but that's the thing about rally, especially rally. You have the national championships, you have the European championship, and then you have the world championship. So there's a lot of places. She developed her skill in the French rally scene, and then jumped onto the world stage with the big boys, and broke down a lot of barriers. But then I don't believe there's ever been a really follow-up. I can't think of another certainly world-class female rally driver since her.
No, I mean, in my little bit of research, I didn't come across anybody. And I think that's why she's, working really hard to try to get a legacy.
Yeah.
Get involved.
There's a lot of dynamics to that. I mean, Lewis Hamilton is a perfect case of somebody that had potential and had a corporation, people backing him and sponsoring him and helping him along the way from a monetary point of view. And that's the issue that I don't know how we get around, because not only do you have to have the talent, so not only do they have to find a woman with the talent, but she's also got to have the money.
You got to have the money.
And unless somebody else is going to supply the money, then now you're stacking the deck.
Right.
And really, the pipeline is an issue, because you have to get these girls in. When you talk about not so much rally driving, but when you talk about like Formula One and open wheel driving,
you have to kind of go through.
They have to be on the go-karts early, to work your way up the ladder and to develop the skill and to winnow out those that have talent and those don't. They have to be on those go-karts, at 10, 11, 12 years old.
Yeah. It's time on your feet.
Yes.
10,000 hours.
It's like running track or playing baseball or football. You got to start, wrestling. You got to start young, because not only does that winnow out those that can versus those that can't, but those that can, even if you have the athleticism, you still need to build the skill, and that takes a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we covered this topic.
Yeah, this was fun.
The Black Tigress, the French volcano.
Yeah.
The
yes.
Gentle Savage. I'm sure some of these are translations from other languages where they sound more poetic.
I like the Gentle Savage. That's fun.
The Devil with the Face of an Angel scares it. And Black Tigress. Black Tigress sounds like a superhero, but
yeah, right?
Like a 70s superhero. Black Tigress.